Cross the legs at the middle of the shins, rest the hands on the thighs near the knees. And see that your weight evenly distributes on your right and your left sitting bone. And you might need to make adjustments to do that. So you may need to realistically look or internally look and see which sitting bone doesn't make as solid of a contact with the blanket or the bolster. I'm going to take that sitting bone and I tilt to the opposite side and I reach underneath. I pull the flesh of the buttock back and out. Sit back down. And then generally the manual adjustment on one sitting bone is such a drastic change from how my body would normally sit that the other side then feels a little off. So I do it to both. And then keep the feet active, but not overactive, so that you continue to press the outer edges of the feet down and extend the heels toward the opposite wall. And then close the eyes. When our sequences are quieter, a little bit more on the restorative side of the spectrum, there's a little bit more bandwidth to have a discussion and an exploration of the practice of pranayama, which is the control or eventually in the later stages or advanced stages of the practice, the stopping or brief stopping of the body's vital energy, which is called kumbhaka, which is the breath suspension. But in the early stages, we really don't worry about stopping or suspending the breath. We just primarily focus on stabilizing the breath. And then after the breath is stable, we focus on deepening the breath and adding different deep breathing techniques to vitalize the body, to bring in more and more energy, to change the nervous system and the physiology of the body using intentional breathing. And then in the latter stages, the breath doesn't really forcefully suspend. It just, by the hyperoxygenation of the blood, the breath will suspend very naturally and effortlessly. So we really look all the way back to the beginning stages of pranayama, where we're mainly just looking at stabilizing the breath. So everybody comes with a natural breathing pattern. Maybe that's a shallow breath, maybe that's a breath that happens in the right side of the body more than the left, like certain ribs will expand more than others. So your exploration here seated is to just bring an evenness to that breath. You're not really even breathing deeply. We would still call this a normal breath volume of air. But within that normal breath's volume of air, you attempt to bring the flow rate of that air to a uniform, steady stream, so that there isn't a large gasp of inhaling breath at the beginning of your inhalation, nor would there be a large sigh type of breath or a mini sigh on the beginning of your exhalation. Now, obviously, there will be a little tapering off quality to the end of your inhalation, the end of your exhalation, and you don't need to prevent that, nor do you need to prevent your breath from getting a little bit deeper just because you're paying attention to it. So paying attention to the breath will bring some quality of depth to it. A good overall descriptor to the breathing right now is in the ballpark of normal breaths, stabilizing the flow rate, paying attention without forcing. And watch for several more breaths. And slowly bring the hands together in front of the heart in prayer position. And we'll chant the sound of Om softly together to begin. Inhale. Om. Release the hands. Bow the head down. And lift the head and softly open the eyes. You release your legs in front of you. Out. Our first pose is going to be Uttanasana, forward extension, standing forward extension. We're going to be using a chair and several blocks. I'm going to place my chair a little bit off of my yoga mat. Ultimately, we're going to remove the chair after a moment or two of being in the pose, and we're going to kind of start at the chair and work our way down to the block. So I'm going to place the blocks next to the front legs of the chair. We're going to start with Ardha Uttanasana, half forward extension, and then work our way into full Uttanasana with head supported. So I start off standing in front of my chair, about 6 to 8 inches back from the front seat of the chair, and I stand with my feet parallel, my second toes parallel to each other, and here I stand in a feet hip distance apart version of Samasthiti, equal standing, Tadasana, the mountain pose. So here I lift my chest, I extend my arms, and I seek to elongate my spine. So you too, seek to elongate your spine. Lift the sternum bone in the front, lift the back vertebrae between the shoulder blades straight up, lift the back bottom ribs up. Turn your thighs in, press down into your inner heels, press down into your toes, and spread your toes forward. For Ardha Uttanasana, hinge at your hips and keep your chest lifted. Extend forward, preserve the Tadasana chest and the Tadasana upper back. Take the hands to the chair. At first, you may not encounter a very significant hamstring stretch, and that's fine. We're not going to rush into the full pose. We're starting here just to get the upper back to move in and the chest to lift. So we'll come to that in a moment. Start off with your attention at your feet. Turn your feet in, press your inner heels down. Press the inner knees back and turn your thighs from the outside, turn them in. So you're broadening out the backs of your legs. Continue to pull up on your patellas. So your thighs are active, feet are active, toes pressing down, and press the heels down. You may find, as you observe and as you remain in these different versions of forward extension, that one of your heels becomes lighter on the ground. One of your back heels starts to come away from the ground. Stamp that heel down, because that is the leg that is losing its broadness, that's losing its fullness in the back leg, expanding vertically and horizontally. So pull up on your patellas, turn your thighs in. From your back heel and your inner heel, extend up through your buttocks. Extend the chest forward, move your back ribs forward. Forward as in toward the seat of the chair. And then focus on your breath here. Not that your alignment becomes unimportant, but preserve the alignment and then take 2 steady, smooth breaths, and even flow rate in, even flow rate out. Now I'm going to lift out of the pose slightly, pick or push my chair up, move it out of the way, and then I'm going to go down onto 2 blocks. I place the blocks directly under my shoulders. There we go. At first, I have the blocks at the tallest setting. Again, we might not really even encounter the hamstrings yet, and that's fine. Lift up on the patellas, turn the thighs in, press the heels down. See if you can find which of your back heels, right or left, is becoming lighter on the floor. From that inner heel, that foot's inner heel, and that foot's back heel, press down, stamp that heel down into the ground. At the same time, press the toes down, lift up from that back heel and back foot through the back buttock, and extend the chest forward. Straighten the elbows, even if it pulls you up out of the pose a little bit. So straighten the elbows, and then retract your shoulder blades to press your chest forward into the space between your hands. And if your blocks are too close together, meaning your hands too close together, then you won't have the space to do that. So the hands have to be even like a ½ an inch wider than shoulder distance apart is fine. Shouldn't be too wide, but just having enough space to push the chest and the back ribs in to fill the territory between the upper arm bones is ideal. And then see, as that chest pushes forward, does a heel become lighter? Press that heel down. Now balance the strength of your legs, not locking your knee. So slightly press weight into the front of the foot, the big toe. Press the shin bones forward slightly without bending the knees, but press the thighs back. So there's kind of an opposing action taking place where the lower leg presses forward and that lower leg forward pressure presses down your big toe and your toes. And the front thigh, like the quadricep pressing back, keeps your heels planted. And those two sort of counteract each other, and that counteracting action of 2 different actions in the legs keeps the knees lifting and prevents them from just locking backward. And then here, take 2 steady breaths. After your 2 breaths, take the bricks down to close. And we're in dandasana, half forward extension, because we haven't released the head forward yet. Take 3 to 4 breaths here. As you breathe, the breath should be steady. And still focus on those leg actions and the chest extending forward. At this point, you've been in some version of Uttanasana for several minutes. The feet might start to fall asleep or feel pins and needles. Not to worry. Don't worry about that. And then from here, we're going to go to full Uttanasana. So you're going to take your 2 bricks. One brick is going to go between about ½ a foot, 3 to 6 inches in front of the space between your feet. That will be the foundation onto which you place the other brick. That 2 brick pile or stack will be the structure onto which you place the head. You lift the chest first,
And then release the head forward, place the head on the bricks. You place your hands at the back of your calves near your Achilles tendon.
And you keep pressing the shin bones forward, the thighs back. The head has to take some kind of a support. Even if it's the chair is fine as well. And if the blocks aren't enough, you could certainly add a third block or a small blanket on top of the blocks.
Then take the hands to the hips, lift the chest.
Inhale your way back up to standing. Extend the arms alongside the body for Tadasana, still feet hips width. And take several steady breaths here as well. And there's a reflective quality now after being forward for a while and having the head supported. There should be some reflective quality to this Tadasana. You can remove the bricks from in front of you. The next pose in the sequence is Prasarita Padottanasana, wide-legged forward extension. You step your feet wide. And we're also going to start with sort of the two concave back and then final pose versions here. So with the feet spread wide, lift the chest, press down the outer edges of the feet. In this pose, we press the outer edges of the feet strongly. Like in the last pose, the heels were sort of the focus point to bringing stability to the legs, the toes and the heels. Now it's the outer edges of the feet and the toes that bring stability to the pose. So lift the chest and straighten the knees. As you extend forward, you're hinging at your hips, lead with your chest. Start in the concave back version of the pose first with your hands on the floor under your shoulders. Look forward. Your feet should be very wide apart here. If you have a normal sized sticky mat, which is about, I think the normal sizes are a little bit under 6 feet. They're, I think, about 5'8" or 5'10" across. Depending on your height, you almost have your feet out to the edges of the mat. So for me, I'm about 5'11". I pretty much completely occupy the mat. I'm about an inch or two away from each side. So you kind of would adjust for your height from there. One way to think about it is that you should be wingspan distance apart with your feet. Press the outer edges of the feet, extend the chest forward. And in this pose, we're going to try a little bit more than the last to maximize the amount of time with the head supported. So if your head doesn't make it to the floor, you use a brick. Walk your hands back so that your heels of your hands align with the arches of the feet. Your index fingers are parallel to each other, pointing straight forward. You bend your elbow joints straight back and release the head forward. If the head can make it to the floor, place the head on the floor. Keep pressing the outer edges of the feet down. Outer edges of the feet. And that's not just turning your ankles to press your outer edges. It starts at your hips. So from your hips, press along the outer band of the leg to the outer foot. And here, with your head supported, allow your throat and jaw to soften.
Although there might be quite an opening in the hamstrings or the legs, it's not that you're going to ignore that, but take your attention more to softening your face and your throat. Like you're actually softening your brain toward the top of your head, toward the support of the head. And then go back to observing steady breaths. Not necessarily even deep breaths, just steady breaths. Press the outer edges of the feet, press the toes. Relaxed face, relaxed throat. And slowly walk the hands forward, back to the Urdhva Mukha, upward facing, the concave back version of the pose. Lift the chest, and then place the hands on the hips. Inhale to come back up to standing. And here you'll simply walk the feet back together. And then once you have your feet a reasonable distance closer than the full pose, you just step the feet back. We're going to move on to Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. We're going to be using a yoga mat placed with the short side up against a wall so that the wall supports the hands and you have the wall to press your hands into, or the baseboard of the wall to press your hands into. We're basically going to take support for everything in this pose that in the final pose would be on the floor, which many of us, myself included, rarely get the heels and the head all the way down onto the floor, but we're going to give support for the heels and the head. So I'm going to place a blanket at the back of my mat. And I'm setting myself up this way, and I'm going to place a block on my mat. I'll come down onto my knees. For measurement's sake, I don't know how obvious this is to see on the video, but if I put my block off of my mat, and if I lie down, and if I literally place the crown of my head on the baseboard, then from there, when I curl my toes underneath, it shows me where my feet will eventually need to be. So right now, I can tell that I have to move my blanket for my feet back a little bit. I'm going to place my fingers with my thumb pressed up against the wall, and my index finger points out to the corner of my yoga mat. I make sure that my fingers and my hands are shoulder distance apart, or even a little bit wider than shoulder distance apart. Not much, though. I spread the rest of my fingers wide, straighten the elbows, turn the biceps forward. My toes curled under, and I have my block on my mat underneath my chest. And I don't want you to really think that you're going to put your head on the block. You're going to press up into dog pose, and the pressure into dog pose and the extension with your arms is going to place your head on the block for you. It's like the rest of your body will just give your head to that block. So curl your toes underneath, lift your knees away from the ground, press your thighs up and back. Extend through the arms like you're trying to press the wall away from you, and extend the hips up. And then your heels alone, not your arches of your feet, but just your heels, should take the support of the blanket. And the brick should support the forehead as well as maybe even the bridge of the nose. You don't have to push the bridge of your nose down, but it definitely shouldn't be supporting the top of your head. Forehead is the main area. Press the wall away, press the hips back, press the heels down. You have to have straight elbows and straight knees. So even if your heels are well away from the floor and you're using even 2 blankets, that's fine. With the elbows straight, turn the biceps up, turn the front shoulder toward the outer shoulder and spread the shoulders away from the ears. Straighten the knees, turn the thighs in, and now stamp your heels down like you did in Uttanasana. Remain in the pose for as long as you can. If you ever need to take a break and come down, you of course can do that. Try to come up again soon after. If you can remain in the pose now, keep the alignment. Take several of those steady breaths. To release, bend the knees, come down. Now we're going to take the mat the other way against the wall. So you have that long edge of the mat to the wall. Come up to standing to rearrange your props. With our long edge of the mat to the wall, we're going to set up the 2-chair headstand. So I'm going to place 2 chairs. The reason we're taking support for this is because the intention is to be in headstand for as long as possible, up to 10 minutes. So if you can hold a freestanding headstand for 10 minutes, you of course can do that. The tendency here is not as much, or the emphasis here is not as much that we're trying to improve our headstand, but we're trying to capture the shape of the pose headstand to create a physiological effect, which is different than just working on, I don't want to say it's different, but it's because of that difference in approach, it may be more appropriate to just use the support rather than do the freestanding pose. An option would be to use to do like headstand at the wall for a moment or two, and then set up, or have this set up, do it at the wall for as long as you can, and then set up, or go into this setup. So I have here, I'm taking 2 blankets on the edge of each chair. I have my chairs close to the wall, right up against the wall, so there's no space between the legs of my chair and the side of the wall. I have 2 blankets on each chair, and I have a gap that's about head distance apart here. A little bit more than head distance. If you have a hard time kicking your legs up with this setup, you would place a 3rd chair or a stool or an ottoman or something right here in front of your chairs that your feet would go on that would help you kick up. So I'm going to kick up, and then I'm going to come take a look at the little videos to make sure that we're good. So you go in. Remember, this was in our little tutorial video online, that when you place your head is going to go, your head goes right between the blankets, the head essentially hangs, and you get your shoulders and upper body as close to the wall as possible. It's kind of difficult for me to do this without knocking out my microphones, but You get your body, you should feel your shoulders make contact with the wall, and you kick up. 2 blankets on each chair, stacked symmetrically, same level of support under both shoulders, and up you go. So you should remain up, and I'm just gonna set a timer right now and come take a look at the videos and see if anyone's having struggles. Good. Yeah, it looks like we're all up. Good, good. Now, normally in headstand, there's a very strong instruction to pull your shoulder blades up your back. However, if you've positioned your blankets and your chairs correctly, then the chairs and the blankets should really be doing that shoulder blade action for you. So you've been in this pose for about a minute at this point, and if there's pain in your shoulders, and I don't want to say like pain because you're doing something with your shoulders, but literal like pain because of the contact between your shoulder joint and the support, you would add additional padding, maybe a third blanket or something like that. But if you add padding to one shoulder, you must add it to both shoulders so that both shoulders are symmetrically supported. Don't concern yourself with trying to move away from the wall and balance. Just put the heels on the wall. Keep the feet active, though, by flexing the outer edges of the feet toward the outer hips. Turn your thighs in and extend up from the tailbone, extend up from the buttocks, extend up from the back thighs and the front thighs, extend up. If your chairs have enough space for this, you can take your arms and cross your arms over the tops of the chairs so that you're sort of folding your forearms on top of each other at about chest level. If you find that that brings a lack of stability to your supported headstand, keep your hands firmly on the supports. And now release your neck. Release your head. You're not doing anything in particular with it. It's not like you're trying to extend your head in any special way, but just release the muscles of the neck. Let your head, your jaw, your tongue truly hang. Even feel like you're letting your brain hang in your head. Then change the cross of the arms, place the other forearm on top. Now, once again, observe your breath. Make sure that your upper back does not sag, that your chest doesn't droop forward toward away from the wall.
Keep your upper back moving in and keep your chest expanding. It's not an aggressive action,
but you want to make sure that you're not dumping your lumbar forward, you're not dumping your middle back forward, that you're still extending, actively extending up
through the whole pose. Your tailbone continues to extend up. And again, with these restorative poses, there are corrections because there are little actions, little efforts in the body, but those should not override your ability to rest your consciousness into your breath and the relaxation in your brain centers. I guess the summary of that last sentence is don't overwork, but also don't physically or structurally go to sleep on your alignment either. You find that middle ground. Just about another minute in the pose. And see if you can be actually completely still, unwavering, unfidgeting, unmoving. Just the breath moves, nothing else. And slowly to come down, one leg at a time. Bring one foot down to the floor, with a straight knee if possible, then bring the other. Don't sit up too quickly. You're not really even standing yet. Just
rest your knees on the floor, cross your arms on your support. Just sort of be on your knees with your buttocks hanging back towards your heels and your head resting on your arms. And taking this brief pause before moving on just to rest and reflect on your experience. Reflect on the nervous system, feel the nerves. And then slowly sit up. And come up to standing to set up the next pose, which is setu bandha, sarvangasana, supported. Well, it's actually setu bandha is bound, setu is bridge, so it's the bound bridge pose done standing on the shoulders. Sarvangasana is shoulder stand or the all limbs pose. So this is supported bridge. This is arguably one of the best, most kind of subtlest poses with the most jam-packed benefits for the physiology. To set this up, we're going to use the wall. We're going to use bricks. If you have this amount of props, we'll also use a bolster. So I'm going to place the bolster at about the middle of my mat, going parallel with my mat. I'm going to place the bricks. I hope you can see this, that I'm placing my bricks like this, two of them up against the wall. Those are going to support my feet. If you have a lot of props and you have two bolsters, these bricks could be bolsters instead, but I have two bricks set up. So I hope you can kind of see that setup. I'll see if I can angle the camera at that.
That's going to be my setup. And now here, I'm going to sit on the edge of this bolster. And I might not have this set up perfectly correctly yet, and we'll just have to see when we go into it. So I sit on the edge of my bolster. I take my hands next to me. I place my feet up on top of the bricks, and I have my feet hips distance apart. Now, here's something I didn't add. This is optional if you have it. This is really nice too, is to place a belt around your thighs. If you have a belt, you could put as many as like 4 or 5 belts around your thighs for this pose. It's really, the sky's the limit here. So you sit, I place a belt around my thighs. If you only have 1 or 2 belts, you would pretty much be placing a belt around the thighs and probably also around the shins or the feet. And you belt the front top thighs together. Okay, I bring my feet up onto the bricks with my feet together. And now we're not quite sure if I have the spacing right. I can pretty much tell already that I need to bring the bolster back, because what I want to have is I want to have straight knees. I'm going to finish straightening the knees once I'm almost completely set up in the pose. But if you can see from right here now, I have my feet up. My shoulders are still hovering away from the floor a little bit. And as I straighten the knees, it pushes my upper body up and over the bolster so that now the tops of my shoulders are supported on the bolster or on the floor. So top shoulders and shoulder blades are on the floor. The bolster supports the middle back and the lower back. Your heels should be on the wall, and you should feel like you can strongly press the heels into the wall. Not that you need that strong, constant effort in the pose, but there should be a solidity to where your feet make contact with the wall. And there should be ample room, if it's possible for you, ample room to either side so that you can rest your arms out to the sides at about shoulder height with your palms turned up. Give one final tuck to your shoulder blades, pull them underneath your back toward the bolster, but remember they're off the bolster. The knees are straight. If you're using the belt, sometimes you actually have to kind of reset the pose and tighten the belts. And the belt is really nice because you can just let the thighs go. And it's almost like the more belts you have, the more you can let the thighs go. I saw a photograph yesterday or several days ago of a teacher that had probably about 8 belts around his legs. And it was just showed this pose with kind of a maximum amount of support for the legs. So that the idea there is that you can let the legs go. Let the eyes closed. And there really isn't that much of a massive stretch in this pose. It doesn't probably feel like a big muscular opening, but there's a subtle opening to the chest, a subtle opening to the junction between the ribs and the sternum bone. Rather than a chest muscle stretch, there's like a a deep, well, I could call it a bone level opening in the chest. And now, as you observe your breath, you'll find that it's much more difficult to move your breath through your abdomen, that your breath here naturally starts to fill your chest and your ribs. And that is by design of the pose. This pose helps bring the breath up to the ribs and chest. That's one of its many benefits. So start to stabilize the breath, start to bring the breath up to the chest, up to the ribs. If your lower back at any point bothers you, you may need to extend your tailbone towards your heels. You also may need to take a little bit more support under the heels themselves. So perhaps you need to take the bricks up a setting. Continue to observe your breath. And start to bring a little bit of extra depth to your breathing so that your breath fills all the way up to the top chest. And now we're sort of taking the breath a little bit beyond a normal breath, not by much, just by maybe 20% more volume of air than a normal breath. You should feel that the shape of this pose gives more breath movement to the chest, to the top area near the collarbones, but you should not be breathing so intensely that your face becomes hard, that your shoulders become active in any way. And then in the last moment here, watch your exhalations. You're still taking a slightly deeper inhalation. As you watch your exhalations, comb out and smooth over your exhalations so that as you breathe out, your exhalation is almost a little bit more, I guess we could call it slow. It's like your exhalation takes a little longer to breathe out than your inhalation took to breathe in. So you smooth that exhalation out even more. You're not straining at all, just taking your time on the exhalation, like your consciousness is dissolving into your exhaling breath. And now to come out, bend up your knees and bring your feet back to the floor. And turn your knees and your chest to the right side so that you basically just roll off of your props. If your legs are belted together, the belts will be fine. Just slowly extend the legs and start to come up to a straight position in dandasana. If you have belts around the legs, now you would start to loosen them and take them off while you're seated. And then we're going to set up for the next pose, which is supported shoulder stand. Now, I am fine with you doing either the chair version of shoulder stand or the normal version of shoulder stand. You would need to have that ample amount of blankets or towels, whatever you have to support the cervical curvature. Or you can do the chair version. We're going to be in this pose for about 7 to 8 minutes. So if you're comfortable holding the classic shoulder stand for 7 to 8 minutes, you would do that. I'm just going to simplify and show with the chair. So I place the chair on the mat. You don't need to place the chair on the mat. It just definitely helps to prevent it from sticking. More important that you have, if you have a sticky mat, you would place that on your chair, and then you'd place a blanket or a towel on top of the chair. And then if you have a padded chair, you might not need any support on top of the chair. I'm gonna, because I have just a metal folding chair, I'm gonna pad it up a little bit. I'm gonna place like that. And so here's really the best or most supportive way to set this pose up would be to set your chair up like this, about a foot away from the wall. And I'll show you why, because the ideal setup is that when you go back into shoulder stand, you can place your feet on a wall. I'm going to place my bolster at the ground. Now, I know for my height, it's better for me to place 2 blankets on the backrest of the chair. Just going to briefly show this, that when I get in and kick my legs over the backrest of the chair, and then I lie back, place my bolster, place my arms through the chair, and I can place my legs up with my feet on the wall. I actually would prefer to be slightly away from this wall. I'm kind of too close right now. So I would just come out, slide down, and set up again a little bit further away from the wall. I hope that makes sense. This wasn't in the little video I made yesterday, but it's a nice addition. So your hope here is to get, or your aim is to get your chest or your top shoulders on support, like a bolster or several blankets. You can thread your arms through the front bar to hold the back bar. And then you'll extend the legs. And if you're the right distance away from the wall, the backs of your thighs will be supported on the back rest of the chair, and you'll be able to place your feet on the wall with straight knees. And you'll have to make a judgment call for yourself if it feels like it's too close to the wall. If you're too close, you're going to feel like you're kind of cramped, like you're compressed, like your knees, if you're too close, then when you press down, it feels like your knees come away from the wall, or rather your knees come away from the back rest. So the spacing takes some practice to get the spacing just right. But once you have it, it makes a very quiet chair shoulder stand. So I'm just gonna, if you're in the pose, you stay in the pose. I'm gonna come out and just take a quick look at everybody. Don't worry if your camera doesn't quite aim at you, that won't be a problem.
Remember, if you're going to set up classic shoulder stand, that's fine. Just make sure that you're set up or start with a good plow pose first. So you do halasana first, kick your legs up and over, get your shoulder blades or your shoulders underneath you, get your shoulders towards each other, you get your elbows shoulder distance apart, get your hands low on your back, and then press yourself up into the pose.
So you have to kind of reflect on your own experience of your pose. If you get in and something feels off or uncomfortable, then sometimes I'll joke in class and say like, oh, it's uncomfortable, your body just needs to open, the discomfort is a good thing. But usually in these restorative poses, we don't actually want to just endure discomfort, because in this pose in particular, there really isn't going to be a big sensation of like a muscle group getting stretched. Maybe you get a pretty intense chest stretch or shoulder stretch if you have your hands low enough on the bar of the chair. But other than that, this should be a pretty quiet experience. So if you're suffering through any pain, discomfort, something feels awkward, then just come out, and you might have to reset. Sometimes just going into the pose again a second time helps you get it. And then you have to think too, like, if your back is feeling pain, you might need more support under your buttocks, like a second blanket under the buttocks. If your legs or your lower back is in pain, or your legs are in pain, you might need to get a little bit further or a little bit closer to the wall to make sure that when you extend your legs and you place your feet on the wall, you're not straining to get the feet on the wall. If you're in classic shoulder stand with your legs extended up, the full classical pose, you would make sure that you're keeping your buttocks tucking up toward your tailbone and your buttock tucking up toward your heels, your feet extending up, the balls of the feet extending up, and keep pressing your hands into your back and get your hands low to your shoulders. And now focus on your breath, regardless of what version of shoulder stand you're in. Focus on the breathing pattern. You get similar expansion to the chest that you did in setu, bandha, sarvangasana. See that the motion of your breath expands your ribs closer to your chest more than your abdomen. And to release the pose, take your hands out of the back leg of the chair if you're able to hold it,
If you're using a dining room chair, sometimes it's too narrow to get your arms through and hold the back bar, so don't worry about it. You could just hold the seat of the chair or the back legs in some way or another. So should have said that earlier, but now we're coming out and now you're bending your knees, you're placing your feet on the backrest of the chair, and without letting the chair move, you slowly slide down off of the chair. If you're coming out of full shoulder stand, you come down out of halasana first, and then you roll out once you're in halasana. And then once you're down, we're going to go right into shavasana with support. So just bend your knees over to the side, turn to the right side. You're going to take one bolster or several blankets for support under the body, and then a blanket for support on top of that bolster for the head. And you're going to lie back onto that setup. So I'm sitting back or lying back onto a bolster. I have my butt off of the bolster. I have my legs at first together like I'm in dandasana, staff pose. And then I lift my chest, I lie back onto the bolster going lengthwise along my spine, and I have my head supported on a blanket. I keep my legs active at first. I roll my shoulders underneath me. I tuck my buttocks toward my feet so that my lumbar is long and I have my shoulders underneath me so that my chest expands. I have a big chest, wide chest, and then rest your arms out to the sides. Rest your feet, rest your legs. And we're going to move into several minutes of Ujjayi 4 pranayama, which is the deep breathing on your inhalations and your exhalations. So before we move into the deep breaths, just observe the normal breathing pattern once again. And by normal, what we really mean is you're checking into what was automatically taking place. And then you're checking in, your observation brings a steadiness and a smoothness to the breathing. Inhale deeply and start to fill your lungs from the bottom to the top. Focus on maximizing the amount of air that comes in, and you're doing that by expanding your ribs. It shouldn't be forceful at any time. So inhale, bottom ribs expand, middle ribs, top ribs expand. And more than just looking at the ribs, you're really looking or feeling your lungs expand. As you exhale, breathe smoothly, steadily, let the lungs empty from the top to the bottom. When you breathe deeply, the vision tends to go up toward the brain, and that eventually will cause the mind to sort of go into a swoon and become exhausted and tuckered out. So actively point your vision, although the eyes are closed, actively point your vision down at your lungs. Like you're visually watching the lungs expand. Keep facial expressions quiet, the muscles of the face, the jaw, and the tongue all quiet. And when you inhale, observe that your two lungs fill symmetrically, they expand symmetrically. You ensure that one lung does not override the other or expand much more rapidly than the other. And you don't want to make hard mechanical corrections to pranayama breathing. Just make observational changes. So like if you notice one lung is expanding more than the other, or one side of the ribs are expanding more than the other,
just by putting your attention on the side that's lagging will tend to be all that's necessary to correct the problem. If you start fidgeting around with the muscles of the ribs and the chest and try to force, then you kind of end up disturbing the nervous system. You take yourself out of the subtleties and the relaxations of the process. So now your attention has to be more inward than effortful. Continue to observe the breath. And then relax your breath, release your breath, and let go of any technique at all, any deep breath. Just let the breath return to normal for a moment or two. And slowly bend up your knees. Extend your arm overhead, your right arm as you turn to the right side. Slowly roll over off of the props. And you find your way up to a seated position. Namaste. May peace be with us all. Om Shanti. So it's good here after your restorative, kind of more restorative practice and some deeper breathing practice to just take the next 10 minutes, 20 minutes to just be a little quieter with yourself, a little bit more inward to observe how the breath is moving in the body, how the energy is moving in the body. So it's good to not just jump up at this point and move on to the next thing, maybe have a quiet breakfast or something like that, and just take time to reflect. So thank you all for coming. We'll continue onward on Sunday, and yeah, we move forward. So I hope you're all doing well.